Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see you here. Rebecca Black is an American singer and YouTube personality who gained fame in 2011 with the release of her single Friday. The song went viral on YouTube, reaching over 160 million views. Her songs, covers, and collaborations have earned her over 1.5 million subscribers. Her latest EP, Rebecca Black Was Here, was released in 2021. And earlier this week, Rebecca has released her first full-length album, Let Her Burn. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Black.
My gosh, I'm way too prepared. Brought many beverages.
Nice. You can never go wrong. Welcome, Rebecca. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And especially as you've just wrapped up your UK and Ireland tour. Can you tell us a bit about that? How is that going? Or how is that going?
It was so much fun. I mean, I have to say, as somebody who is just kind of at the beginning of like my touring career, and I was able to come here in May and play my first shows, and then visit a few more cities. It's so incredible to be so far away from home, but feel so supported, and to see people really connecting to, especially what I've been doing recently, and. Yeah, it's just, I feel so special that I feel so grateful that like every night the energy in the room, even though half the tour I was playing an album that wasn't even out, was just so good and so warm and so special.
Amazing. And you mentioned your album that's just come out now. And it's come out 12 years after you were first kind of in the spotlight. Mm-hmm. So what has the process been like putting that together? What was the inspiration behind it?
I mean, it's been something that's been in the making for 12 years in one regard, in the sense that like ever since my start, as unintentional as it was, once that happened, I had never felt more out of control in my own life. I mean, I was a 13-year-old, so like I was the epitome of out of control, obviously. But I just so desperately, I think, for so long, felt like I had been robbed of this experience of being able to show the world who I was on my own terms. And that obviously came with a lot of pain, that came with a lot of shame with what I went through. And I don't know if I knew it at the time, but like the most important process for me over the past 12 years has been, one, obviously growing into just any version of the person that I was going to become, because that doesn't exist when you're a kid. You have no idea who you are or what you're going to be. But yeah, just again, like being able to define myself on my own terms and understand what I had to say. And I mean, we can talk about the inspirations of the album in terms of like what each song is particularly about, but really the inspiration behind the album was I needed to, as a person, as an artist, as a creative, understand and find the ability to know that I had something to offer when the entire world had told me for years. And really harped on the fact that like I had nothing to offer. And even though I don't know if I'd be able to say that a few years ago or a few months ago or even a few days ago, but like I know now that like a piece of myself somewhere deep down believed in who I was and believed in what I had to say, and knew that like regardless of whether anyone thought it was good, like as a person I deserved that right. And yeah, I guess that's why I'm here, is because this album is in so many ways just the beginning of talking about what I really have to say and showing people who I am, Yeah.
I just wanted to go right back to the very beginning before the tour and before kind of everything. Because you were obviously very young when Friday came out. Was music something that you'd always wanted to do, or was it something that you just kind of decided to give a go?
Well, I was a kid who grew up performing. I mean, I think just like on a whim with my parents trying to give me and my brother things to do, they like tried putting my brother in karate lessons and tried putting me in a dance class to see if hopefully that gave us some version of a hobby, and I fell in love with performing, and I spent the entirety of my childhood in different performance groups, dancing, in theater. I was like a huge musical theater kid. And that was just like where I found a first version of like freedom and identity. So yeah, I was always doing it. And for me, like Friday was just like one of those things that I stumbled on an idea, talked about it to my parents thinking that, or to my mom thinking that like she would never agree to doing it. And then, you know, I got the opportunity to do it as kind of like a, let's see if this could go on a resume one day as like experience, you know, for whatever I want to do. I, at that point, like, was by no means trying to become a pop star at 13. It was just kind of like, this is something that puts you in a studio or like gets you the opportunity to see a side of this that you're still trying to figure out for yourself, you know?
Yeah, and was it something that when you kind of saw it come through, and when you had made the music video, was it something that you thought was going to go viral?
No! Oh my God. I mean, even at that point, 10 years ago, like the internet, I was just some kid in California going to middle school, like living my life. I mean, I remember, and I've talked about this many times, but like, you know, while that video was, or before the video existed, and even just when I like met with the company for the first time, it was kind of like, oh, you never know. Sometimes like, you know, if it goes online, it can get views and become a thing. But like, I was like, absolutely not. There's just no way that's going to happen to me. So it was really just an experiential, again, like resume building thing of maybe one day when I start to apply to college, I can talk about the experiences that I had, as like random as that particular choice was. But
and how did the rap from Friday come about? Because that's something that's often talked about.
The rap
bit.
The rap verse.
Yeah.
It didn't exist until like the day of the video. They showed up and were like, "There's a rap verse in it." I mean, I don't think people realize like truly how, and we were talking about this just before we came on stage, like how much of a bystander I was in that situation. Like I had no creative decision making or control over that thing. Like I was literally just showing up, you know, they sent me the song. I felt bad and like I didn't want to ask for another song because what right do I have to like be that picky about this thing that's just kind of going to exist in my own world? And you know, the video kind of came about like I was just there to do it and have the experience and all of that.
Yeah, and since then, obviously, you've released so much more music and YouTube content as well. Do you kind of get sick of people calling you like the Friday girl or associating you with that? Or is it something that you kind of think of as something that helped get you to where you are now, but now you have more to offer?
I mean, on one hand, I obviously, I think one of the most important things for me to come to terms with over the past 12 years has been that like I, on one hand, will never be able to control what everybody thinks about me. And if I do spend the rest of my life trying to do that, I'll rob myself of like a lot of freedom and opportunity to think about other things. But at the same time, like, of course, it's frustrating because that was one tiny moment of my life when I wasn't even who I am now. I mean, imagine if like every person in this room was known by like one day in their life from when they were a 13-year-old. Like, we would have really complex relationships with each other and ourselves. And there's just so much more to who all of us are, you know, that exists way down the line. I mean, right now, like that was half my life ago, but hopefully I'll live a lot longer than I do now, and that will become like a very, small, early days version of myself. And also, like, I think the idea of defining people by one thing that's happened to them and defining people by something that happened to them as a child is just like such a disservice to like who we are as people and the capabilities that we have. So of course, like, I'm not the Friday girl. I've lived so much longer than that. But at the same time, I know that people will always see me as that. And I think that's a shame for them, because if they took a second to, look past that, I think maybe they could see something that's a way more interesting story than just what Friday was, honestly.
Yeah. And throughout the years, you've been very open on your YouTube channel and appearances on The Tonight Show about mental health and the impact that a lot of the internet trolling and cyberbullying has had on you as a teenager. How did you deal with that at such a young age?
I mean, I did the best that I could. Like, there's not, unfortunately, and even still, I mean, we watch kids go viral every day, and like the resources that exist for young kids, specifically in that experience, it's kind of impossible to guide somebody through that because it's such a strange phenomenon, and also the internet is changing so much every day. So the ways that people go viral and deal with that is different for everybody. But I mean, I think back then, like, all I could do was cope with it. And for me as a child, I've talked about how, like, being that young, you have no sense of self. It completely, warps your perception of reality, because everybody who's older than you assume to be smarter than you, because that's kind of how we're taught to be, or at least how I was taught to be when I was that young. It's like, your elders guide you. So when the world full of adults told me that I was an idiot, told me that I was ugly, told me that I was stupid, told me that I was talentless, told me that I had literally no worth as a person, like, there's nowhere else for that to go other than straight into your reality, right? But as I grew up, I mean, the only person that was going to guide myself through it was myself. And I felt really lucky to be able to work with some people and professionals even that really helped me guide myself through that healing, because I would have never been able to be here in this moment if it weren't for the work I had to do on myself. Yeah.
And what do you think are kind of like some of the cultural changes that we can make to protect like other young teens like yourself who are put into similar positions?
That's a big question. And I wish I had the answer. But I mean, I think really it all starts with the way that each and every one of us interact with something online. And it's funny, the thing that I've gotten the most in terms of like people kind of talking to me about how their feelings have changed about me or that experience over the past few years is so many people have said to me, like, I didn't even realize that you were 13. I didn't realize that you were a person that was real. I didn't really realize that like you would see what I was saying, but it's like we all use the internet in the same way. Whether or not I was 13 or 18 or 25, like every single one of these people on the internet reads and watches in the same way, and is trying to find the version of themselves on the internet and be, accepted. So the way that we interact with that, every single one of us, like whether it's liking something or commenting something, mean, but it's funny, all of those things are equally as meaningful. And also like sticking up and showing support for people is equally as meaningful. And sometimes I think like, no matter how like mean a joke is, but it slides by because it's funny, like, is that really worth it? Doesn't mean that criticism can't exist, but like, I guess it's at what cost are we all willing to, do something because it's right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then in 2016, you started releasing a lot more new music, like The Great Divide, followed by Foolish. And firstly, what was the kind of inspiration behind those? And secondly, how did you deal with going from the backlash of Friday into becoming a different artist and releasing a lot more serious music?
Yeah, I mean, that specific period of my life, like, I was just learning. I had to go, I had this thing happen to me as a kid. I went to high school, finished it up, graduated, convinced my parents that I'm gonna go try and do this for myself and learn and find my way into rooms with songwriters, with producers, with anybody who would work with me, just because so many people wouldn't give me the time of day at that point. And those songs were just I think the first, versions of myself on paper of trying to figure out how to make something that was somewhat resonant of me, but I was still only 18, 17 when I wrote those songs. So, even now, as a 25-year-old, it feels like it's been so much time since that, and that was still such an early version of who I was as an artist. And I'm still in an early version of who I am now, but yeah, I think it was just trying to kind of figure that out and learn. I was trying to take every session as an opportunity to be taking in how does this process really work, because my original experience was nothing like the industry worked. It was kind of a here's a song, here's a video, bye. That's not creativity really. So yeah, I think that what I make now and even the time since those first kind of releases was so important to just learn, and also learn how to make my own choices and speak my own choices, because my biggest issue as an artist when I decided I really wanted to do this was, okay, I've decided I want to do this, but I'm so stuck in my own shame that I can barely even speak in these rooms, and I feel like I shouldn't be here. And I feel like everyone that's in these rooms with me doesn't want to be here with me, because why would they want to be here with me? Because I've had this big kick me sign on my back for what feels like my whole life. And I had to grow through that and push through that. And so Rebecca Black was here. That was the first project that I was okay, I'm onto something. I'm figuring out how to lead through my creative influences and really put who I am into these songs just a bit more. And then, Let Her Burn, the album that just came out, that process started while Rebecca Black was here was happening, and that was really empowering to really, really lead something through who I am now.
And do you have one song or one song lyric that you're most proud of, that means the most to you?
Oh, wow.
It's a difficult question.
Yeah. It changes all the time, and I think it's been really cool and really special to see the way that people interact with different songs, because I have different ideas of, what I think people will love versus what they end up loving, and it's really fun to see people love the songs that were the bigger risks. Songs like Misery Loves Company and Destroy Me, and even there's a song called Doe-Eyed on the project that is one of the most insane things I've ever written, because it's so sensual and explicit, and that was really important for me as an artist to be able to find legitimacy in. But I think if I had to pick a song right now, I'm really proud of the song called Performer. Yeah.
And in 2018, you appeared on the American Singing Contest, The Four. And I think that was probably the first time that a lot of people had seen you since Friday on the big screen. What was that experience like?
It was a scary one. Again, that was a period of my life where I was really still trying to understand who I was and find acceptance within myself. And it was an opportunity that came up. And my biggest challenge over the past few years, or one of them, has, been like finding redemption, not just with other people, but with myself. And when I get an idea to do something, I go for it. So I did that show, and it was so crazy because that feels like lifetimes ago, but at the same time, that was a really awesome little healing moment for me to walk into a room full of people who probably only knew me from, again, this thing that I've been unfortunately defined by for so much of my life, and give everything that I had. And people were so accepting of it and so supportive. So yeah, I think it was just kind of a small but important step into finding the confidence that I have now.
And when you look back through your career and your time, is there one moment that you're most proud of, one kind of highlight that you have?
I think this is the highlight.
Oh, well.
Just this experience of being able to talk about this moment that I'm in, and this whole week has been the highlight, because finally, whether people like it or not, I'm here. I've shown you who I am. Mm-hmm. I've shown you what I have to offer in this moment, and I will only take it further from here. And it's so exciting. Just again, as a person who finds so much identity through creating and performing, I love what I do, and I feel meant to do what I do, and to be able to do that and play it to a room of, I was just in London 2 days ago for my biggest headline show I've ever done, and I played to 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. And 7 years ago, I booked a show in New York, and 8 people booked tickets. So I had to, or bought tickets, so I had to cancel it. And to see that evolution and see that, I guess it's ironic because for so many years people have been I can't believe that you're real and not this weird viral robot. It's seeing people show up today or show up to that show and see 1,000 people in that room. I can't believe that this is real, and it's so exciting and so encouraging to see people just resonating with, whether it be my story or my music or both, and creating a really good energy in the room. That's the highlight, I think.
Yeah, amazing. And when you look back at your journey, is there one person that you feel really indebted to, or one kind of big inspiration for you?
There have been, over the last few years, so many people, and not just over the last few years, over the entirety of these past 12 years, and I could probably go through, further than that, who have just stuck their necks out for me, and who gave me the time of day. And I couldn't put that down, I think, to one person, but people who have gone against, I guess, what was cool or popular to do, or maybe the safer thing to do, in order to just give me a chance and hear me out and see something, in me that was more than this thing that, again, I've been defined by for a really long time. That being producers, songwriters, the people on my team, people in my family, my friends, other artists that I've had the opportunity to work with. That's really, the people that show up in my shows, again, that's so meaningful, because there was a time in my life where that didn't feel like it existed at all,
Who's been the best person you worked with?
I could never say that. I don't know if there's a best person. You mean in terms of music or producing? Oh my God, that's an impossible question to answer. This album is an amalgamation of a lot of different collaborators and a lot of different producers and writers that I was able to work with, all so different and from so many different backgrounds, that it'd be, impossible to pick.
Yeah. And in 2020, on an episode of Dating Straight, the podcast, you came out as queer. What has the reaction to that been like, and what has it been like sharing such a personal part of you with the world?
I mean, I feel really lucky to be able to be somebody who can come out in a time where I was met with so much acceptance and like so much welcoming. And I've been so grateful for that, because I'm just very aware of the fact that like that one has not been the case for so long. And also there are so many people within my audience who have accepted me who don't get to share that same experience in their own world. So it's been really empowering. I mean, I love being able to play a show full of gay people. It's amazing. It's some of the best, energy, and there's this shared, I think, like thread even outside of my own relationship to the community in terms of like my own sexuality, being a queer person, that I've said this before, but so many people in the queer community were there for me and stood up for me before anybody else would, because of some thread that they found with me in my story, again, before I even talked about my own, piece of it. And that's never left me. So I have so much respect for everybody in the queer community, and I'm, yeah.
Yeah, and your career has been one that's filled with many roller coasters, many challenges that you've faced. What would you say has been the biggest challenge, and how did you overcome it?
I mean, I think that it's this moment as well, even though it's the highlight. Like, I am here to show people again and convince people who love to define everything on the internet by like really simplistic things that like, I'm here to do this and here's what I have to offer. And I know that the internet has really high standards, especially for like young people, young women in entertainment. And so I guess that all comes from the ability to even have the confidence to do it. And like, I've never been more ready in my life, but at the same time, like, it's fucking scary sometimes going up against the internet and trying to convince people who you're only just like a flick on their phone, right, for 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. And if they've already seen you before and decided how they feel about you, it can be really hard to change that. And I felt that, I think, through like my own shame for the last 12 years. So getting past that level of fear is probably one of the biggest things. Yeah.
And I want to save time for questions because I'm sure a lot of you have them. Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca? Yes, let's go to the international officer.
Hi.
I was just saying before, I know Friday was so long ago, but honestly, I think... Sorry. I was just saying before, I know Friday was so long ago, but I feel like in a way it was my hyperpop awakening before that existed. It was like something about it like clicked in my head. And I feel like when you released that remix with Dorian Electra, it was almost like reclaiming that into who you are now. And I guess my question is, given that some of the music that you produce is hyperpop, how do you understand that genre? Because to me, it feels like a really expansive kind of genre in the sense that you've got 100 gecs on like one end, but then you've got kind of bubblegum like Slater and even yourself and Dorian Electra. You've got kind of like Glaive, which is more like punky, and then you've got more chill like I Know Bonsai. So how do you kind of see yourself in that space, and what does hyperpop mean to you? And my second question is for the alt girl, is where do you get your clothes from?
Where did I get my boots from?
On the
Where
bag.
your clothes from?
Oh,
Just
the
in
bag.
general. Is there
Clothes.
like a place that is like really good to find old clothing that you can?
Well, that's the exciting stuff to talk about. No, I'm kidding. That's funny. We'll get there. But and thank you. How do I understand hyperpop? I mean, I've had such an interesting relationship with it over the last few years, and I mean, I think that first and foremost, like, I have so much credit to give to the artists in the hyperpop world who were some of the first people to ever give me, you know, like a personal sense of legitimacy. And again, were some of those first people who saw me as more than like, I don't know, some random thing that happened a few years ago. And I've always been really grateful for the sense of community that that gave me. Like people like Dorian specifically were so welcoming and so, I don't know, just like an inspiring person to even know and understand and see somebody kind of rise through their own creativity. But I think that hyperpop, you know, it's interesting to see the world become more familiar with this like super niche part of music and try to commodify it as something that like, it's just one of those communities that I think a lot of pieces of greater pop music take inspiration from, but don't give credit to in a way to make it like a little bit more like, you know, commercially marketable. But I think that as a community, as like a space of artists, it represents so much of what I hope pop will become in terms of the risk that it takes. You have artists like Gex that like in their music like are so self-referential to what pop is and could be, and I think that's, I hope to see more of those artists like actually become big pieces of pop and not just like have their elements taken from and used in pop, because like those are the geniuses that will continue to make music interesting and will continue to make music inspiring and continue to, you know, build a legacy of artists that like are continually shaping what pop could be. So I think it's exciting. And I think it's an important thing that like, I hope doesn't just get like commodified and then like thrown out as like something that's just one note. Because like you said, it's so vast and it almost is about more of like a creative energy than a actual sound, you know? But I don't know if I would consider myself fully a hyperpop artist. I've been so lucky to work with so many people in that world, and I'm so inspired by, you know, like legends like Sophie who have just approached the way they make music in a particular way, and I think that's what I'm trying to do more than anything, is like try to challenge myself and make things that will hopefully challenge other people in some way, or just be iconic and fun if nothing else, you know?
I think there's also a second question.
Clothes. No, everyone here has such good style. I feel like I have no authority to say anything, honestly. But yeah, shop vintage. Yeah, but I mean, everybody knows that that's the way to go, is what I'd say.
Does anyone else have questions? Let's go to the member over here with the scarf.
Thank you. So you mentioned about the troubles, the issues that you faced when after the video release and the backlash you got, and I've also watched the video of you on BuzzFeed where you also discussed that. And I was wondering, what would you say to people that are facing that at the moment, and like the backlash and depression and other issues like that? What would you say to them, and what would you recommend to them to help them get through that period?
It's, you know, I mean, I think there's so much advice that I still have to learn from in terms of healing, and there's just like truly like no rule book on how to get through dealing with, you know, I think so many of us are so used to our personal bubbles of like the people that we give authority to and build trust with, in terms of like when somebody gives you critique about yourself, you know why they're giving it to you. It's not just like a stranger on the street being like, I think you should do this, or like, this was bad idea, or whatever the comment is that you get on like a backlash type thing. And so I think even just recognizing that like what that experience is so unnatural, but at the same time, like, you don't have to give validity and authority to what every single person thinks about you. Like, at the end of the day, like, just as much as somebody has, I guess, the right to say whatever they want, you have the right to intake whatever you want. And like building that kind of inner like layer of being able to bounce off, or what's a better way to say that? Like that inner layer that allows you to say like, I agree with that or not, is so important to building who you are. And that doesn't mean that like you won't be able to take or not take criticism through that too, because that criticism is so different than backlash, right? And yeah, I really think that like us as people just can't be defined by one thing or one moment or one decision. And also the internet lacks context most of the time. And that's like one of its like biggest failures right now. So that makes things a lot more difficult in terms of like intaking comments or people writing comments, you know? Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's go to the member on the end of the front row.
Thank you. I feel like in the past couple of years there's been a kind of counter movement in pop culture of reflecting on people who've had a moment of fame years ago and people who were at the time unfairly mistreated, people like Hayden Christensen, Brendan Fraser, who are now seeing a big resurgence in popularity and a kind of recontextualizing of everything. And I was wondering how much you've felt that and how that's changed your relationship to that time in your life.
That's a good question. I mean, I think my relationship with that time in my life is really unique because, one, I was literally so young that like most of us don't remember much about like, you know, the times when we were 13 and the everyday moments, unless they were like really traumatic or like really exciting, you know? Like in terms of the other pieces of my life from back then that I remember, it's like I remember the Justin Bieber concert that I went to, or like I remember like the really fun trip I took with my family or my friends, you know? So it is bizarre to see so many people, I guess again, like be surprised with the person that I am now and put that right next to this version of myself that like honestly doesn't really even feel like it's mine anymore. Like there is like this very particular image of like the Friday video where like it's me in front of the fake bus stop with like the backpack on, and like I don't even think that that's like, even though it is a picture of me, it feels like as outside of myself as like it probably feels to anybody else here. Like it feels like something that doesn't even feel like a real piece of my life because it's become like more of a symbol of this thing of, you know, what people think I am, or also, I don't really know a better way to say that, but yeah. It's interesting to watch the internet grow and shift a narrative that it's had on its own. And I've felt that over the last 12 years, but like definitely over the last couple years, especially as I became more vocal and like learned how to you know, articulate who I was a little bit more and find myself on the internet, like I watched the internet shift its perspective with me, and it went from being like this bizarre, random internet moment to like, oh, this song feels like it represents like a nostalgic piece of time or a nostalgic piece of internet culture, or watching people also grow up and learn from like what maybe they would now consider mistakes and how they dealt with that moment, and saying like, I can't believe that I said this, or that I let myself do this, or I can't believe that the internet let this happen to a child, you know? And it's interesting. I think what I hope, again, the context thing is so important, because yes, this thing happened, it was crazy. It's awesome to see so many people now look back and say like, oh my God, I would never do that now. I hope the internet never lets this happen again. But like, it is happening to other people, and it's happening to other kids. And like, you can have somebody say that one day and then literally 2 seconds later see them comment on like, you know, some TikTok of a kid and making fun of somebody. So I hope that the internet really, truly like learns that like these moments that feel isolated are all connected in the ways that we behave with them. So yeah, I guess it's like finding the threads through the internet is the most interesting piece.
Thank you. Let's go to the member from Keble College.
Hiya, thank you for coming. I was just wondering if there's any artists or producers that you'd like to collaborate with in the future. As you said, it was a very collaborative album, but if there's anyone that you've not yet collaborated with that you'd like to. And then the sort of second part, if there's any other creative industries you'd like to tap into a bit more. You know, you said you were a musical theatre kid, so if you wanted to get more into that or something like that.
Yeah, oh my God, there's so much that I want to do. I mean, I think I found such like a sweet spot in becoming such a directive part of like the visuals that I create, and that's really learning that like I can go as crazy as I want to and come up with you know, the more crazier ideas that I have and execute them and know that my audience will like live for them the most. That's really exciting as like a theatrical kid, and it's, I think, finding like, I just try to bring that energy that I loved so much as a kid into my shows and into that. But in the future, like, I would love to go do everything and, you know, explore different types of art and works that, I don't know, would be so interesting. But in terms of artists, I mean, I'm so inspired by so many different people. I mean, I'm a huge fan of like Trent Reznor, and I thought it was so exciting when like even just hearing about them, 9 Inch Nails, like working on like that Halsey record a few years ago. I love to see these like more kind of detached genres of music come together and make something interesting. And I think that like that album was such a good place that can go so much further. And I would love to try to take it there with somebody like them. I mean, I love Aphex Twin. Like, I would love to work and do something just really surprising and challenging. God, I don't know. I love artists like Mitski. I love Caroline Polachek, who I hear is here tonight somewhere in the city. Obviously, I've been so inspired by people like Sophie. I love Charlie, XCX. Oh, Addison Rae. I am obsessed with her. And I think that we could save pop music legitimately if we worked together. So Addison, hit me up. Yeah, there's so many, I think, exciting people and faces out there, and it's really encouraging to see so many, like, to be in a time where music can be truly as niche as it deserves to be, and people will resonate with that. Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the member at the back.
Such good questions. It's so fun.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much for speaking to us tonight. I suppose there's been this discussion in the last few years around exploitative contracts in the music industry. And I know you mentioned that, when in the Friday era, you were thinking about that as being something for your resume and doing something cool. But, how do you now view, production companies like that which you worked with, and how they can potentially sometimes, treat early career artists, poorly?
I mean, I'm trying to be ginger with what I'm saying, or what I say about this, because I do think it's important. This was something else we were talking a little bit about before I came down. The music industry and the entertainment industry, like any other industry, is set up by adults working in only their own best interests, because it's a job, right? It's a way to make money, it's a way to make a living, it's a way to do things. And unfortunately, in the entertainment industry specifically, a lot of children get involved, and there's literally no way to involve children without exploiting them in some way, no matter what you're doing. Luckily, in more traditional parts of the entertainment industry, like the film industry maybe, I can't speak for everything because I don't know, but there's been more time for standards to be put in place to protect kids, right? So you have like set laws and child labor laws, and things like having a set teacher involved with something to make sure a kid is being treated like a child and protected. And yeah, I mean, how do I wrap that up nicely? I think that unfortunately there's just many parts of the industry that exist everywhere, whether we know about them or not, that don't have those same protections set up, and like that is just not right, obviously. And I wish that it was an industry that like put children's ethics and ethics around children before anything else, but unfortunately I'm not the one guiding every person. So yeah, yeah.
Thank you. And let's go to the member in the green jumper.
Hi, Rebecca. I guess just to for context, one of the things I admire the most about you is how unashamedly yourself you are, and how brave and open you are, whether it's sharing, mental health experiences, or, your lived experience of your sexuality, or the, horrible experiences that you went through. And I guess, given all that you've spoken about tonight, about how hard that was and how unprepared you were, and the lasting impact that had on you, where did the bravery and the resilience that you had to kind of get off the mat and come out and put all that work in and share all that work with the world, how did you face that? And I guess for other people who are kind of coming back from a really difficult experience, how did you kind of stand up and go again? I'd really like to know.
Thank you. I mean, there were so many moments, and I have so many moments still, where things get really, really, really difficult, right? And there's no person that can take you to the place that you need to be emotionally, right, other than yourself. I mean, yes, like therapy is so important, but it is you that shows up every day to do the work on yourself. It's you that shows up every day to take the advice. And I've had a lot of really hard and dark moments with myself growing up, but at the end of the day, like, I think whether this was conscious enough or conscious or not, I oftentimes think of who I was like before Friday ever existed, and who I felt like I wanted to be when I grew up as a child. And I think about like the things that brought me joy and the things that brought me like vitality as a kid, right? And adventure and fun and all of those things. I would just be so heartbroken if I like let all of that go. And I think about how maybe like disappointed my younger self would be if she were to one day watch me give all of that up, like not on my own accord, you know? Or because I was afraid or because I was ashamed and like, yeah, I think once I realized that what I was struggling with so much was just shame, and how none of us deserve to have shame, really, or like shame just as a whole is like the most like bone-curdling, like soul-freezing experience that we can have. And shame comes from other people, not from ourselves. Like, we are not born with any version of shame. It was just a matter of like, how do I let this go and process this? And what will happen when I do that? And then I started to find that like leaving my body a little bit. It's a weird way to say that, but I don't know. I'm cold, so my brain's thinking weirdly. But once I started to like let some of that go, I was happier. I had more creativity. I feel like I felt just like myself, and like I could make decisions and lead my own life, and that everybody deserves that. I don't know, as I got older and had more perspective, it just, once I started getting little semblances, it was like, I deserve this. We all deserve this. Like every single person in this room deserves to have that experience. And that I feel lucky that like, whatever that was in my brain that like pushed me through that I was able to have that experience and be here. So yeah.
Let's have maybe one last question. And let's go to the member at the front.
I just wanted to ask, what's your creative process like, and how do you create something that authentically reflects who you are?
Oh, I mean, it's so different every time. And I think it all just comes with like, starting with a question, starting with an idea, and knowing that like the idea that you start with may be not a single piece of what the finished product is like at all. But a lot of time it's just like the very, very beginning is sitting with yourself in silence, and a lot of times I'll like open up my journal when I know that I'm about to go write and just like start talking to myself and see what is actually on my mind, because I found that like there's a surface level of what we're all thinking about, but the quieter and quieter that you can get, and the more that you can get what is in here just out in some version. And that doesn't always come through like physically writing. A lot of times that can also just be like in a studio with a mic and just start somewhere. That's how you find some really special stuff, when you try not to like, I know this sounds so cheesy, but when you try not to think about it too much, because those like natural decisions, I think, are really important. And then as far as finishing stuff creatively, it's just a matter of trusting your instinct. Like, I think nothing feels done until it's done. And I don't know how else to explain that other than like, I will go through 20 versions of a song. I'll work on a song for 6 months. I'll work on a song for 2 years. And as long as I have that kind of inner knowingness of like, this is really good, but like it's not done. I know that, and I just have to trust that. And then one day, with enough changes that I make or notes that like me and a producer will make on a song, one day that feeling does go away. And trusting that as well is another challenge. But yeah, so I guess it's almost like downloading information that the world gives you and trying to do something with it, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. And one question that we ask all of our guests is if you could give our students one piece of advice, what would it be?
What you have to offer to the world is truly unique, and the way in which that you perceive something and your point of view is just as worthy and just as important and just as interesting as anybody else's, and like the world isn't complete without it. So whatever thread that is that you find that is so important to do so, and will lead to so much creativity and fun and reason within your life. And also in terms of, I guess, my story, like, you are literally defined by nothing than what you choose to define yourself by. And it doesn't matter how many people tell you otherwise. You are the only decision maker. And once you find that, you find everything, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unfortunately,
Thanks
that's all we
for
have
having
time for, but thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's been so fun.